Fine, I'll say it. Did you know gaming is probably the best video game YouTube channel? Yeah, that's right. I finally said it. I was the one brave enough to say what no one else would. Someone brave enough to finally take a stand and say what is true. And they hate me for saying it, but I'll say it every time. Did you know gaming, every cancelled Pokemon game, new leaks discovered because they do investigative journalism? They figure out their own facts, stuff that no one knew before? Mwah, chef's kiss.
We got our hands on a lost Pokemon game, and we're leaking it in today's video. Not only are you going to see it in action,
ooh, what's that?
To show how you can play it for yourself.
Oh, it's a PC game.
Leak is the wrong word. We actually got it legit from one of the developers, so technically it's more like we're dumping it, along with...
What? How would one of the developers even still have the code? You know how Nintendo is with their IP? They keep it under lock and key all the time. They keep it in the fieriest depths of Hades.
All the raw files and concept art. But first, we're gonna cover the full history of every cancelled game in the series. Pokemon Pink,
Now remember, they mean cancelled as in it ceased being developed. Not cancelled as in it said a racial slur. Keep that in mind. There are two meanings to that word now.
Pokemon Picross, Pinball DS, enhanced editions of Fire Red and Leaf Green.
Enhanced editions of Fire Red Leaf Green? Hey man, we're gonna put a remake in your remake, brother.
And a couple more. We'll cover them all in chronological order, except the one
this
we're
looks
dumping,
ridiculous.
because we want to save the best for last. A couple quick caveats before we get started though. First, not all these games were technically cancelled. Every game had unique circumstances, but
not all of them had a bad tweet from 10 years ago, okay?
Cancelled is a close enough blanket term we're using for games that never made it to store shelves. Some were more like failed pitches at Nintendo, while others were 100% finished but got locked away in a vault. Also,
oh, what? I hate it when that happens. That's so frustrating. Like, yeah, okay, maybe you don't release it, and I know there's IP issues and legal issues, but I don't care, man. I'm a gamer. I don't care about legal issues. I don't care about IP issues. I just want to play video games. Just put them out there. Don't finish a game and then don't release it, because I guess if they finish a game and then they don't release it, it's probably because they think that it's really bad and it's not worth releasing because it would harm the actual franchise, which may actually be the case. Imagine being the person making the call on that. Sorry, I know you finished developing your game, but it sucks, so I'm not going to put it out there.
I'm not going to cover Meowth's Party or Pikachu DS because they were just tech demos created to show off the capabilities of the GameCube and DS, and were never meant to become full games. We're not covering Pocket Monsters 64 either, since its supposed existence seems to be based on decades-old misunderstandings from fans who thought a full Pokemon RPG was in the works for N64, but in reality...
I thought that said D&D, as in there's a Pokemon D&D role-playing thing. Could you imagine that? Yeah, I'm gonna need you to roll a sleight of hand check so you can throw this Pokeball.
That game was just Pokemon Stadium. Okay, with all that said and the intro out of the way, let's start off by dissecting
that would be sick,
Pokemon
though.
Pink, which it appears Game Freak planned to release alongside Pokemon Yellow in 1998. In other words, Pokemon Pink and Yellow would have been paired releases, just like Red and Green. Fans had no...
I bet they didn't release it because they were like, ooh, Pink is for girly girls, and girls don't play video games, so it would be a financial flop because no girls are playing video games.
No idea about Pink until April 2020, when source code for Blue and Yellow leaked on 4chan. There were all kinds of interesting finds in the code, like unused Pokemon sprites, and audio files showing pretty much every Pokemon was intended to say its name.
Oh God, I hate it. Why? No, I'm glad they didn't do that. Jesus.
Probably because they were cursed. So in the final game, the only Pokemon who talks is Pikachu. The source code also contained a couple references to a non-existent Pokemon game, like a header for, quote, Pocket Monsters Pink and Yellow. Notice how Pink comes first. There's another line that mentions Pink and Yellow packages. For comparison, here's what the equivalent code looks like in earlier games. Basically identical, except it says Red and Green packages.
Oh, so in this one you would have had a Clefairy that you run around with instead of a Pikachu, which would have been, well, it would have been a lot worse, really, because Clefairy actually sucks as a Pokemon. You wouldn't be able to evolve it, so you just have a really, really wank Clefairy on your team. Not that Pikachu is that much better, but at least, you know, is super effective on water types. What's Clefairy gonna do? Have a heart attack whenever it sees Machop?
To explain packages in layman's terms, Red and Green are both built from the same source code, but which package identifier gets ticked determines which game you can play on a Game Boy cartridge.
Oh, isn't that the same thing that they did on recent games, where you could change the version of the game that you were playing on emulators, I believe it was with Sword and Shield, just by changing one value? And it would change the game. So you went from Sword to Shield just by ticking a box or changing a hex code or something like that, and it would change you from Sword to Shield. It's very funny.
The red package is ticked, the game boots up as Pokemon Red. So all signs point to Pink and Yellow being another paired release. And in that regard, you could say Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee are their spiritual successors. We talked to the cutting room floor admin Huguette Hikari to explain technical details, and she said they experimented with changing the package from yellow to pink to see if it'd magically unlock a lost Pokemon game. Unfortunately, and unsurprisingly, it didn't work, but it was worth a shot. We can't say for certain, but it appears Pokemon Pink was likely scrapped very early in development.
Because they realized how bad Clefairy actually is. No one wants to run around with Clefairy.
Since these two lines of code are the only evidence of its existence. The Pokemon companies only mentioned Pokemon Pink in one interview, and we'll get to that in a minute, but without more info from them or Game Freak, it's impossible to say how Pink would have been different from Yellow.
Oh, I mean, all they're gonna say is, yeah, we would have like version exclusives. You'd have had a Clefairy instead of a Pikachu. Would have been way harder because the thing sucks.
Presumably, the game and a lot of the sprites would have had a pink palette. Some fans believe Jigglypuff would have appeared on the game's box art, considering its prominent role in the anime, and that Pikachu and Jigglypuff were the only two Pokemon fighters in the original Super Smash Bros.
Well, wasn't Clefairy supposed to be the original mascot of Pokemon anyway, so it makes sense that they try and make a version with that because they, for some reason, are really down with the idea of having Clefairy be the mascot. I don't know why. Have you seen it?
Maybe those two were chosen for Smash because at the time, they were set to star in 2 upcoming Pokemon games. But the most popular theory is that Clefairy would have been the star, because the Japanese version of the Game Boy camera had this frame of Pikachu and Clefairy together, which got removed from later international releases. But more importantly, because the 1996 Pocket Monster manga that predates the anime starred Clefairy and Trainer Red. Some fans...
Maybe I'm being too harsh on Clefairy. Maybe it would have actually been good. I mean, it can learn a wide variety of TMs, wouldn't be able to evolve. It's probably got similar stats to Pikachu. Maybe I'm being slightly too harsh.
Speculate that while Pokemon Yellow uses elements from the anime, like a Pikachu partner, Team Rocket, Nurse Joy, or Officer Jenny, Pokemon Pink would have been more like the manga, and also maybe cater more to female fans, which was an explicit priority for the franchise at the time. After the leak
Really? Okay, maybe overestimated how backwards the developers were back then. Maybe in Japan they were more progressive, like actually girls do play video games.
4chaners started making a Pokemon Pink ROM hack to bring that vision to life with a female player character, but ultimately it was never finished. The Pokemon Company never addressed the leak. We did, however, find one instance where the words Pokemon Pink crossed the lips of company president Tsunekazu Ishihara. In a Japanese interview from 2000 we had translated, Ishihara and series creator Satoshi Tajiri explained Gen 1 and 2's development. We'll make the full translation publicly available, linked below if you want to read it. Regarding Pink though, he says, quote, "We made red and green, then after that we made blue. Later we made yellow, and it might have been nice if the next games were called pink or purple.
Purple would have been great. Greatest color in the world.
But if we did that, all we'd be doing is perpetually making extensions of the originals."
Okay, well, I mean, they made the original game like 5 times anyway, and then you could also just move on to the next one after anyway. It's not like if you make Pink, it's like, well, there's nothing we can do now. We made Pink, that's past the point of no return. The door is locked. We can't get out now. Please, someone release us. We have to just make the same game over and over again. You could have made Pink and then just made Gold and Silver next anyway.
In context, he's explaining why the next games were called Gold and Silver, so they could keep using colors while also signaling to customers that Gen 2 is more impressive than Gen 1. But Ishihara's sentiment that Pink or Purple might have just been perpetually making extensions of the originals might also apply to why Pink got cancelled, because there were already 4 versions of Gen 1, and a 5th version would have been overkill. Not
The Pokemon Company finally coming to the conclusion that releasing the same game so many times might be a little bit too much. It's like, guys, we can release the same game a lot, but only 4 times, okay? We can never do it more than 4 times, unless we're gonna remake it, because then we can release the same game again. Then it's okay.
Not just for the fans, but also for Game Freak. They needed to devote more resources to making Gen 2, which ended up releasing 2 years behind schedule, even without getting slowed down making Pink. Maybe we're reading too much into that quote, but regardless, that was indeed the situation. The most pessimistic view was voiced by Huguette Hikari, who said it's possible Pink was never anything at all, not even an idea. A lot of source code was copy-pasted to make yellow, so maybe Game Freak's programmers just deleted the words red and green and replaced them with pink and yellow without much thought. If that's really all that happened, Pokemon fans have spent the last few years theorizing about nothing.
Well, listen, Pokemon fans are very used to theorizing about absolutely nothing. In fact, I would say that most big fandoms on the internet spend about 95% of their time having discourse about things that will either never happen, don't matter, or their creators don't care about.
Somewhere out there, Ishihara's laughing his ass off at our expense. Hopefully not, though, and someday he'll reveal a big binder about Pink on Japanese TV, like he did a few years back with all those Kapumon sprites.
I love that
Next
art.
up is
It's
a
so
game
good.
we can say with 100% certainty did exist because the full game leaked online 2 decades after it was cancelled. Playable from start to finish, even the credits. Pokemon Picross was a Game Boy
Wait,
Color
really? I've never
puzzler
heard of
first
this.
announced in Japanese magazines in 1999, which showed off screenshots and some original artwork. The game was developed by Jupiter Corporation, the same guys who made the Pokemon Pinball spin-offs, or at least the 2 pinball games that didn't get cancelled. More on that later. Jupiter created the Picross series a few years earlier, and it sold well.
What is Picross? I don't understand this. What am I looking at right now? I'm looking at a board. It looks like Minefield a little bit. I have no idea what Picross even
Enough
means.
that they released about 40 more Picross games up to the present day.
40?
They crossed over with Mario and Zelda, and briefly with Pokemon in Picross NP Volume 1.
Dude, that's gonna be so good! There's a company that just comes in and is like, all right, we're gonna release a new video game today. And by a new video game, I mean we're just gonna put a JPEG of the main character of the series on that part, and then we're going to recolor that part. All right, guys, well done. New video game made. We did it, guys.
Super Famicom game only available via the Japanese Nintendo Power Service. But there was also a full Pokemon game that slipped through the cracks. Picross's gameplay is kind of hard to explain, and we don't want to bore you, so simply put, it's kind of like Minesweeper, or Sudoku with less math. If you're
Oh, it is like Minesweeper, I was right.
interested in learning, Pokemon Picross comes with a tutorial taught by Professor Oak, and after the leak, the community took it upon themselves to release an English fan translation. The game's got an original 23-piece soundtrack. That's what you're hearing now. In addition to Oak, it's got Pikachu, Misty, Team Rocket, locations all around Kanto, and lots of anime references. You can
What made the people of the Pokemon Company think that the 5-year-olds playing Pokemon Blue and saying, "Ooh, Pikachu, funny, look at the color, do zap zap," wanted to play a Minesweeper adjacent puzzle game?
also get Bulbasaur, Charmander, and Squirtle as partner Pokemon, which change the border colors to green, red, and blue. Interestingly, you can also get Clefairy and Jigglypuff as partner Pokemon, which changes the border to pink or purple. Pink or purple? Anyway, it's a good
It's all
little puzzle
connected,
game and
guys.
pretty addictive. In 2015, Jupiter released a different Pokemon Picross game for 3DS that got pretty good review scores. Unfortunately, it was digital only, so nowadays it's impossible to download on your 3DS, since Nintendo shut down the eShop in 2023. You can catch
No, but the completionists saved all the video games, though. They're saved. Just download them on the find a legal way to. You can't find a legal way to play it. What am I supposed to say, Nintendo? How am I supposed to encourage legal things when you won't let me? Just download it, man. Just download it.
Catch both games
Whatever.
online, though, if you're up for sailing the high seas. Not that we condone piracy, of course. And now for something
the only way to play it.
different. A pitch within Nintendo to develop upgraded Chinese editions of Fire Red and Leaf Green.
Oh,
We don't want to
Chinese.
get lost in the weeds with the entire history of Nintendo in China, but long story short, in 2000, the Chinese government instituted a ban on consoles entering China because they thought addictive video games were melting the brains of Chinese youth.
Well, to be fair, they have remained very consistent on that. They even have their own version of TikTok now that doesn't have any of the brain rot the Western version of TikTok has. It instead has educational content. And in China, I'm pretty sure they instituted a law that said that you only were allowed to play video games or go on the internet on your phone for about an hour a day, which, you know, at least they're being consistent, right?
A couple years later, Nintendo managed to sidestep some of those laws by partnering with a Chinese national to found a new company called iQue. iQue went on to produce Chinese versions of Nintendo consoles, including
Oh,
the Game
what the
Boy
hell?
Advance, and localized some of their games for the Chinese market. In 2020, iQue was hacked and a lot of their records leaked online. Among all those documents was a PowerPoint presentation that iQue presented to Nintendo executives.
Oh, this is made in 2004, which is the same year that Fire Red Leaf Green actually released. So they had this going when they were making Fire Red Leaf Green.
In 2004, outlining their plan to develop Chinese versions of Red and Green that would have implemented some remarkable upgrades. For the most part, these still would have been the same exact Fire Red and Leaf Green released around the world, collecting Pokemon, going town to town collecting badges, and so on, but with new features added, mostly focused on internet functionality.
Internet functionality?
The games would identify the player's location and change the in-game weather to match the real-life weather outside. Previous
Okay, cool.
Pokemon games already had a day-night cycle based on real time, but this would have taken it to the next level.
So if it's really sunny outside, you get the sunny weather. That's kind of cool. I like that.
Specific Pokemon's locations around Kanto would have changed depending on real-life location as well. Details aren't spelled out.
The only problem I could see with that is if it is snowing, like it's the winter, and you have a really long snowy season, the video game is going to be all snowy all the time until months later, which Playing it in a snowy game for months on end does not seem that fun.
Out in the document, but it sounds like a prototype of Pokemon Go in that respect, with players needing to go here and there to catch them all. Pokemon centers would also be expanded, with only 30 Pokemon storable offline, but tons more stored online in Pokemon Center PCs.
Whoa, only 30 Pokemon storable offline? That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard them say in their lives.
Sort of like an early version of Pokemon Home. On the second floor of these expanded Pokemon centers, fans could battle on the internet. And not just the kind of online battles later introduced in Gen 4, instead, gameplay would switch to a computer screen, and you'd use the GBA as a controller. Battles would use Pokemon Coliseum's code, so all Pokemon and environments would be fully 3D. There'd also be
that's impressive.
Distributions of special Pokemon and items, which wasn't a thing in Pokemon games till the DS era. But
you gotta understand, way back in 2004, this is crazy new tech. They didn't really dive into the internet until years later. To have this out in 2004 would have been absolutely incredible. It would have blown people's minds. The little kids over there would have their brains melting outside of their ears and their eyes would start to bleed from happiness.
Instead of Nintendo just giving you special Pokemon, you'd go to completely new parts of Kanto to hunt for them. So kinda like the Sevi Islands for catching Mew and Deoxys that were already special events in Fire Red and Leaf Green. But IQ said new areas would also get added gradually after launch.
Oh my god, they were gonna turn Fire Red Leaf Green into a live service video game.
To say, these enhanced
Groudon
ports would have been
EM?
far ahead of their time, with features not seen in Pokemon.
What is Groudon EM? Why does he have EM next to his name? Electromagnetic?
Games till years in the future, or in some cases still haven't been seen even today, almost 20 years later. There also would have been some other small tweaks like egg hatching variables. And of course, the text would have all been Chinese.
Emerald?
So why didn't Chinese Fire Red and Leaf Green get made? The leak doesn't say. But if we had to guess, the Pokemon Company didn't want to hand over the keys to their precious IP. We wanted to know.
Yeah, they would have to give up a lot to be able to release in China. Like, you gotta change so much when it comes to the Chinese market and the Chinese audience.
For sure, though. We didn't want to just guess. One of the guys who makes up Did You Know Gaming lives in China. So he went looking for former IQ developers to find the story. He couldn't nail down a concrete answer on this.
He went looking? Like he just went out, he just walked out of his door and was like, all right, let's see, where are these developers at? Like, any IQ developers around here? Hello? And then some old man pokes out his window, is like, IQ developer? Haven't heard that name in years. Come in, sonny, let me spin you a yarn.
The devs didn't want their names on record, but they did share a story that shed light on how relations broke down between China and the Pokemon Company around that time. Long story short, Nintendo President Iwata, Pokemon Company President Ishihara, and some other execs flew out to IQ's headquarters. The execs ultimately decided too many Chinese people were pirating Nintendo games, so it just wasn't worth investing in the Chinese market anymore.
Well, maybe they're pirating because there's not really ease of access to Nintendo games. Didn't they just say that Nintendo consoles were banned? Wouldn't pirating be one of the only ways for them to gain access to it? Piracy is an access problem, okay? It's a service issue. If you have really easy access to things, you're much less likely to pirate them.
IQ only released a few more Nintendo games after that. Then lots more that were previously planned ended up being canned.
And yeah, if there's high amounts of piracy of a certain thing, it just shows that there's demand, and if you can meet that demand, then you'll make a lot of money.
Including a fully finished localization of Ruby and Sapphire. It's a shame those upgraded versions of Fire Red and Leaf Green never got made, but most of us can't speak Mandarin anyway, and even less have access to Chinese servers, so you probably couldn't have played them anyway.
Fine, I'll learn Mandarin.
For Game Boy was one of the earliest and most beloved spin-offs in the franchise, and its GBA sequel got review scores on par with the mainline series. But after that, the series just kinda died off. Unknown to the public though, a playable demo for a third entry on Nintendo DS was developed in secret. The Pokemon Company said they were the best graphics they'd ever seen outside Japan, but sadly, the game was never finished. Fans first became aware of the project thanks to a leak in 2021, which included a spreadsheet saying Pokemon Pinball DS was planned to release around the same time as Diamond and Pearl, and that it was being developed by Fuse Games.
I thought this was it, and I was like, whoa, what is that rock thing? That's cool. What Pokemon is that? Is that like a cancel Pokemon? And it says Samus below it, and I'm like, oh, wait, this is Metroid.
Same team who made Mario Pinball Land and Metroid Prime Pinball.
No. I can't believe they said that a pinball game was the best graphics they've ever seen. They're like, whoa, have you seen the texture on that ball? Have you seen the graphics on that flipper? I've never seen a shadow flip and flap so greatly.
No other information was available, so we searched out the devs to learn more about it. Fuse shut down almost 15 years ago, but we managed to get in contact with their artist Matthew Nightingale. one
How?
of 9 guys
What?
who worked on Pokemon Pinball DS.
That's
He
so
told us
impressive.
It would have been more of an adventure game, similar to their take on Metroid. He believed it was the quality of their Metroid adaptation that led Nintendo and the Pokemon Company to come visit Fuse's office in England.
This is so
and fund
goofy.
The development of a playable demo with 3 stages. To help you visualize Matthew's description of the game, we commissioned artwork for all 3 stages. The first
Oh my
stage
God.
was Sinnoh's countryside. The time spent playing on this tape.
Dude, this channel is so good, man. Please
Table represented
subscribe
the
to
amount
Did
of
You Know
time-
Gaming. It's seriously mind-blowing how much work and effort and digging they put into every single episode. All this stuff is amazing. It's stuff that you'd never know otherwise. I think they deserve so much credit. Please go subscribe to Did You Know Gaming. Watch they have a massive catalog of videos of stuff that I know that you didn't know about video games. You need to watch it.
It took to travel from one city to the next. Pokemon appear on the table as you travel down the route, like Diglett bumpers or Pikachu up a tree. You hit Pokemon with the Pokeball to stun it, then tap it with your finger to catch it. If you didn't click quick enough, it runs away. After enough time's gone by, the city gates open and you shoot the pinball inside to progress to the next table, the city stage. Catching Pokemon's simpler and faster than the older games, so by the time you're through the countryside and the city, you've collected enough Pokemon to form a team. Then it's
Catching Pokemon in the pinball games felt like it was a Herculean task. I felt like Atlas pushing the thing up the mountain. Oh no, that's a different guy. Atlas held the world. I felt like Atlas holding the world on my shoulder. And only when I was finally able to put it down, that release felt the same as catching a Pokemon in the pinball games, because it just felt so hard. Maybe I was just a child and I was bad at the games. Sisyphus, that's the one. I felt like Sisyphus pushing the rock up the mountain, and then I had finally reached the top when I was able to catch it, even though Sisyphus never actually reached the top.
time to progress to the demo's final table, where you fight a gym leader. Out of all the Pokemon you've caught, you need to decide which ones to take into battle, ideally with type advantages like water versus fire. The gym stage is double-ended. On one end, you have your flippers with a Pokemon between them, and on the other end is the gym leader's Pokemon. You power up your attacks by hitting the ball to certain parts of the table. Then once you've charged up enough
That's so
power,
cool.
you fire your ball into a hole to make your Pokemon attack. The table only has one ball, so if you lose control of it, the gym leader can get a hold of it to charge his own attacks. Pokemon
That's
Pinball
so
DS
cool.
also would have had Wi-Fi multiplayer battles that played out just like gym battles. Matthew says the game also would have had an evolution mechanic, and probably would have come bundled with a Rumble pack you plugged into the GBA slot. Nintendo and the Pokemon Company were really impressed with the demo, but for some reason they never greenlit the project for full production.
Yeah,
So
why?
nothing got made beyond the playable demo.
I guess they just thought that pinball games are felloof, like zombie games. When 2010 turned around and everyone thought, no, zombie games felloof. No more zombie games. Too much now. Too many zombie games. No more zombies.
Matthew wasn't invited to that high-level meeting, but he suspects it came down to contract disputes. Pokemon pinball games didn't exactly print money like the core series does,
damn.
so there wouldn't have been as much to go around.
Wait, only 1.4 million bought Ruby and Sapphire pinball? I am one. I am the 1.4 million. That's me out there on the streets fighting the good fight.
For all parties involved. Fuse ended up going bankrupt in 2009. Partly because Pokemon Pinball didn't go to market. No one else from Fuse, including the former owners, were willing to share more details with us.
Dude, that sucks. They were making Pokemon Pinball. They had a really good idea. It probably would have sold decently. And Nintendo was like, no, you're bankrupt now. Bye-bye. And then they're just all drop this. Man, this
Where
sucks.
that demo is now? Well, it's probably out there somewhere. We asked Matthew if it was lost to time after Fuse went out of business, but he said no. Nintendo paid for its development, so they must still have it in their possession. Leaks of early Pokemon prototypes are becoming more common these days, so who knows? Maybe someday it'll find its way online and we'll all get to play it. Next up is Pokemon Gray. The game fans were expecting
No,
after
was this
Black
real?
and White, but were surprised when they got Black 2 and White 2 instead.
Dude, this video is just a waterfall of juicy giblets for us.
It was long dismissed as baseless fan expectations, but we did a half-hour expose on Gray last year with evidence to the contrary.
I thought he was going to say, we did a half hour of Google searching and here's what we found.
You can go watch last year's longer video if you want, but we'll summarize the highlights here and add some new info. In a 2012 issue of Nintendo Dream we had translated, series director Junichi Masuda said, "During Black and White's development, we were thinking about making another version, and weren't thinking about making a direct sequel or making two different versions. Honestly, while we were making Black and White, we weren't thinking about making a 2 at all. But we already had a general idea that Kyurem would play an important role alongside Zekrom and Reshiram."
It kind of makes sense that they weren't planning on making a sequel, but I'm really glad that they did because honestly, sequels way, way, way better than the third version that they just released, even though it sold way worse than the original Black and White. So Black and White sold 15.6 million, and then Black and White 2 sold 8.5 million. That's tough. Listen, I'm a YouTuber. I know what it feels like to release a banger video and then do another one and have it get half the views. It's heartbreaking, and I don't have people's jobs on the line, and I didn't work for 2 years on that video. So having that must absolutely suck, but I will say, do love those games.
We went digging for old filings, and here's receipts showing that a couple months after releasing Platinum, they registered URLs for Pokemon Black, White, and Gray, and also registered trademarks for all 3 colors, along with a few others, like Scarlet and Crimson. The site PokemonGray.com actually existed at one point, though just as a placeholder. There's also a few...
I thought that they had to register those just so that squatters wouldn't pick it up and then use it for nefarious businesses. Like, you're gonna register every possible variation of something because it's cheap. It's not that expensive, so you can do it pretty easily. And if someone else gets a hold of it and starts making some fake news, then that could be a problem for you. So obviously you want to get all those registered, get all those under your wing.
Black and White's internal data. Those games feature 2 key items called Dragon Stones. The Dark Stone, which is Zekrom in its dormant state, and the Light Stone for Reshiram. The data also contains a 3rd key item called the God Stone, which was gray in color and presumably once meant for Kyurem, but it ended up going unused. Black and White's internal data also contains a table that reveals how many forms every Pokemon has, and how many Game Freak was planning they will have in the future. Interestingly, the table suggests Game Freak didn't know how many forms Kyurem was going to have in the next game. This lines up with another quote from Masuda, where he says they knew from the beginning Kyurem would fuse with other Pokemon in the next game, but didn't necessarily know he'd fuse with Zekrom and Reshiram specifically. At the time they were making Black and White, they were open to the idea of Kyurem fusing with other Pokemon as well.
Yeah, they just made it up.
3DS came out
So, what if we made Kyurem fuse with Patterrz? Yes, I know. We're missing out on the content that you desperately need.
Months after Black and White, so fans expected Gray was going to launch on Nintendo's new handheld and not the old, basically retired DS.
But it didn't.
In magazine we translated, Masuda says that was never going to happen. At the time, there were 150 million DSs in the hands of consumers, but not even 20 million 3DSs. Game Freak could sell exponentially more copies on older hardware because of the larger install base, and they could make even more money releasing 2 games instead of 1. So they
yeah, I mean, that's why they do it. Guys, it's not so that you'll find someone to trade with. Don't fall for the Game Freak propaganda. They don't care about you making connections with buddies so you can get version exclusives, all right?
They went to Pokemon Company President Ishihara to see if he agreed. Recounting that meeting, Masuda said, "Every time we finish a game's development, we're left with a feeling that there are still things left unfinished."
Wow, really? No! No way! Every time we finish a game's development, we're left with a feeling there are things still left unfinished. Surely not. No, that can't be right. No, what? But they spent like 6 months on it. How could things possibly be unfinished? That's crazy. At least they're self-aware about it, right?
Development on Black and White was wrapping up. We were just starting to come up with lots of fun new ways to make the 2 versions more distinct. There was no way we...
It's almost like they could benefit from a little bit more time to develop their games. Ooh, I don't know, maybe...
could implement them in time for Black and White's release, so we gave up on including them, even though we really wanted to. So at that point, we decided to make 2 versions of the next game, but we hadn't decided they'd be sequels yet. When we talked to Ishihara, he said, "If it's going to be on DS instead of 3DS, I want some kind of new innovation added to it." It was then we came up with the idea of numbering for the first time in the series. So
this is so funny. The Pokemon Company is so funny, dude. I love them so much. They're so funny. Guys, we need some new innovative things that we can do for our next game. Guys, what if we put 2? What if we did 2? What if we did a sequel? No one's done that before, right? No one has ever done that. Guys, has anyone ever done a sequel before? That's some pretty good innovation, guys.
The plot set 2 years after Black and White, and a development time of 2 years, we felt like we wanted to add the number 2 into the titles as well.
I
That
love the
meeting was
Pokemon
pretty
company
much
so
the nail in
much.
the coffin for Pokemon Gray. And by our math, releasing 2 games instead of 1 made them about $100 million more in revenue. As far as how Gray might have been different from Black 2 and White 2, besides packing everything into a single title, the sequel's director Takao No clued us in on Famitsu. He said his plan to make them different from a typical third version came down to 3 core pillars: new protagonists, new towns, and a new adventure taking place 2 years in the future. In other words, Gray probably would have starred Hilbert and Hilda, had the same towns, and taken place the same year as the originals. So,
Oh yeah, because it's just the same as every other third version. Like Crystal, Emerald, Platinum. It just would have done the same thing, where it's just the same character, it's the same story, for the most part. Actually, it's not the same story. There's like slight differences. I don't care, shut up.
basically a Gen 5 version of Pokemon Platinum. There also wouldn't have been a continuation of N's story. Masuda says they originally wanted to leave N's whereabouts a mystery at the end, just flying away on his dragon to who knows where. But fans loved the character so much they felt they had no choice but to bring him back in the sequels. So for Black 2 and White 2, they had him return to save Kyurem from Ghetsis, help you obtain the legendary dragon.
He really does just spawn out of nowhere in this game, doesn't he? He just mysteriously materializes. But it makes sense that he comes when Ghetsis is about to do his plan. He's probably keeping an eye on Ghetsis the entire time to make sure he's not doing any more crimes. And honestly, should have just killed Ghetsis. At this point, he's like, well, I tried to give you a second chance. Time for a little murder, but he's probably not a murderer. Not many people are murderers, to be fair.
Dragons, then just kinda retire to his castle. But initially, the plan was to never see him again after he flies away, and leave his destiny up to fan imagination. But actually, N superfans might be interested to hear we might not have seen the last of him just yet. When Black 2 and White 2 was released, Masuda was asked if fans might eventually see one more pair of sequels with Black 3 and White 3. He said, if in the future we feel that we want to continue, perhaps we'll have a continuation. But we're really satisfied with how Black 2 and White 2 have turned out, so perhaps not.
No, there's no way. That was in 11 years ago. There is no way they'd make a Black and White 3 right now. It'd be like starting a YouTube series, uploading 5 episodes of the series, making 7 billion other videos, and then coming back 11 years later to make part 6. It just doesn't make sense. All of your fans are pretty unaware. They probably haven't played those games. It's been so long since those original games came out. The only way I could see that maybe happening is if they did like remasters or remakes of Black and White and Black and White 2 first, released them, and then did 3. But it seems like a bit of a lost cause because we already saw that Black and White 2 had so much less in terms of sales compared to the original Black and White. So they know that sequels make less money. Why not just make another game at that point?
That interview was more than 10 years ago, so maybe Game Freak's come around since then. Who knows? Maybe that's what we'll get instead of Gen 5 remakes. And now for Pokemon Z. We found out Game Freak's official explanation in a 2016 Spanish magazine where the interviewer asks why Z never happened. Masuda says,
Z, or Zygarde, is the most, bar none, ripped off Pokemon in the world. Zygarde deserved so much more. It was so cool. It had so many forms and they did nothing with it. Absolutely nothing.
We never really planned to make a third version. We always want to do things that surprise our fans. For example, after Black and White, people thought Pokemon Gray was going to come next, but instead we made Black and White 2. People thought Pokemon Z would come after X and Y, but taking advantage of the fact it's the 20th anniversary, we decided to deliver another surprise with Sun and Moon. In other words, instead of Z, they released a brand new generation to celebrate Pokemon's birthday in 2016.
Okay, I can kind of get where they're coming from with that. They want to do something really special, which is fair. It's not like they did anything special with like Donkey Kong and Nintendo or anything like that for Donkey Kong.
But to us, that sounds like corporate deflection, because what he said isn't actually consistent with series history. In all 3 previous generations, a paired release was followed up with a return to the same region about 2 years later. X and Y came out in 2013, so Z should have launched in 2015, not 16. In fact, 2015 was conspicuously the only year in almost a decade that didn't get a new mainline entry. And it's
I am willing to play devil's advocate here. Let's go back and have a look at that. I think that is because they genuinely needed more time to make Sun and Moon. They wanted to make a new generation, and they were like, boom, let's just dive into it. Let's just make a new generation. I think they just needed more time. I think that they split the development time between Pokemon Z to release in 2015 and then try to do Sun and Moon. Sun and Moon would be even worse than it is, which that's not to say that Sun and Moon is bad. I think Sun and Moon is fine. I like it a lot, but it would have been even worse because they would have much less developers, much less time to work on it. Just wouldn't have been, and then they would have nothing to release for the 20th anniversary. So if they'd done Z in 2015, they might not even have a game to release on the 20th anniversary in 2016.
Only year in almost a decade that didn't get a new mainline entry. And it's not just Game Freak's release schedule that suggests something's missing. There's also data hidden in their own games. We broke this down in exhaustive detail in that half-hour expose last year, so for this video, we'll give you the short version. In a combination...
Have you seen Sun and Moon? It didn't have more development time than the others. I mean, just because the end product doesn't seem that much better than the others doesn't mean it didn't have more development time.
...of data mining X and Y's internal data and a leak of Sun and Moon's source code, it was revealed inside those games was a list of every Pokemon game, including some that wouldn't come out till years later. The purpose of those lists was to facilitate games connecting to each other, like trading and battling. Sun and Moon's code showed placeholder data for virtual console versions of Gold, Silver, and Crystal, which hadn't been announced yet, as well as 2 games called Alola Reserve, which eventually became Ultra Sun and Moon. Similarly, there were 2 entries called Kalos Reserve, positioned as if they were going to release in 2015.
Ooh, yeah, it says X3 and Y3. Wait, it said X3 and Y3. Y3? 3?
All 7 games in the data eventually did come out, except the 2 Kalos games. So actually, Game Freak's programmers weren't just reserving space for Pokemon Z, they were making room for 2 games. 2 games make more money than 1 after all. Surely there wouldn't have been 2 Pokemon Zs, maybe X2 and Y2. Or XZ and
probably.
YZ with the Z.
Well, since they were just coming off of making Black 2 and White 2, I think X2 and Y2 would have made more sense, right? Which showed, look at it, it's like Zygarde 2. I think that would have been probably the best idea they could have gone with that if they were going to go down that route.
Stylized to look like 2s. There's no evidence for what they would have been called though, so for the sake of simplicity, we'll just refer to them collectively as Pokemon Z for the rest of this video. The anime shines even more light on that Z-shaped hole in 2015. Historically, new seasons sync up with new game releases. The first episode of the Black and White anime aired the same week as Black and White the games. Black and White anime Season 2 broadcast the same week as Black 2 and White 2.
Dude, the logistics of the Pokemon Company boggles my mind. I know they make ridiculous amounts of money, but having anime and video games just ready to go at the exact same time, it blows my mind. I can't imagine what the project managers must be doing to get that on. They must have been snorting 10 lines of coke, downing 17 glasses of coffee every single day. They must be so stressed.
The XY anime and games also released the same week. Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire launched with the episode where pretty much all the new Mega Evolutions made their anime debuts. And finally, the XYZ anime aired its first episode in October 2015, which is when Zygarde's 10% and 50% forms made their first appearance, along with Zygarde cores and Zygarde cells.
Isn't it crazy how they had all these cool concepts and ideas of Zygarde and then just did nothing with it in the video games? Like in the anime, they may have done something with it, but I don't want anyone coming out here saying, well, actually in Sun and Moon, you can collect Zygarde cores, because going around and collecting 100 versions of the exact same item is not a fun minigame, and it's not a good story either. Like this could have been such a cool story. It reminded me of Cell a little bit. He goes around and absorbs all these cells, and then he becomes stronger, and then he becomes a final form where he transforms through various different forms. I think that's really cool. It reminds me of DBZ, and there's such a missed opportunity.
Anime's all planned out long in advance, so it appears Pokemon Z was originally scheduled to launch alongside the XYZ anime in 2015. Zygarde only played a small role in X and Y, just waiting in a post-game cave with no story connected to it.
Look at this, it's just such a cool morning. He just gets thrown in a fucking cave. It's so dumb. It's the same thing they did with Mewtwo in Generation 1, except in Generation 1, that game was held together with like duct tape, and they had like 5 people working on it.
The same role Kyurem had in Black and White, which got more fleshed out in the sequels. Fans expected a similarly expanded role for Zygarde in Z.
Look how cool this animation is.
Pokédex seemed to hint in that direction when it said, quote, when the Kalos region's ecosystem falls into disarray, Zygarde appears and reveals its secret power. But that never happened.
Could have been a cool story.
2 new Zygarde forms, cores, and cells found their way into Sun and Moon.
Look, it's just a fucking Zygarde cube in Alola for some reason. How did it get to Alola? Did it swim? Did all the Zygarde cells just migrate for the summer? Like, oh, it's sunnier over in Alola. Let's go hang out there for a bit. And then some 17-year-old Hawaiian kid just runs around and picks them up?
Instead. There's also some unused content in X and Y's internal data that suggests Game Freak was planning more for Kalos, at least at the time those games were in development, like AZ's Floette, which has unique stats, a signature attack called Light of Ruin, and even its own cry in X and Y's internal data, none of which ever got used. X and Y's data also has 2 moves for Zygarde, 1000 Arrows and 1000 Waves, that didn't get used either. A similar thing happened in Gen 5 when Freeze Burn and Ice Shock were found in Black and White's internal data, but didn't get added as Kyurem's signature attacks until Black 2 and White 2. That the same thing happened twice suggests Game Freak may have originally intended Thousand Arrows and Thousand Waves for Pokemon Z. Z never came out though, so those attacks got introduced in Sun and Moon instead. All that evidence strong.
It just seems so jank and put together at the last second, like they completely forgot Zygarde even existed. They were halfway through developing Sun and Moon, and then they were like, oh, dude, wait. Guys, dude, we forgot. Oh, no, we forgot. Oh, no, Zygarde. No, Zygarde, I'm sorry. We forgot about you. It was his birthday, and we totally forgot. We didn't even get him a cake. We didn't even get him a game.
Only suggests Game Freak intended to make Z while they were developing X and Y. So, why didn't they? We spent about 5 minutes getting overly thorough in last year's video, so this time we'll just give you the short version. Simply put, it's got a lot to do with the Gear project. Basically, it's a Game Freak company initiative that aimed to make a new franchise that could become even more popular than Pokemon.
Which they, to be honest, have not been doing so hot with so far. You know, I think it's really great that they're trying to make new games. The Gear project at Game Freak is a separate team where you can just come with your ideas and present your ideas. And if people like the ideas enough, then you can work on it and you can make a game. And I think that's great. I think it's a great way to do things. I think it's a great way to foster new talent. I think that's a great way to keep your employees' morale up by showing them that if they bring something genuinely good, then their ideas can have a seat at the table. That's awesome. But the games that they make from it are not that good.
According to one of Game Freak's directors, Masayuki Onoe, there are 2 different production teams here, simply named Production Team 1 and Production Team 2. Team 1 is fully dedicated to Gear Project, while Team 2 is for the Pokemon operation. What that means is that Game Freak as a company is prioritizing Gear Project, which is production team number 1, more than Pokemon in general. We're always trying to create something that is equally exciting or more exciting than Pokemon. In other words, for a good chunk of the 2010s, they were devoting lots of resources to making non-Pokemon games, like the rhythm platformer Harmonite, quirky horse racer Pocket Card Jockey, side-scroller Tembo the Badass Elephant.
All Gear Project games are outsourced with a very small team in Game Freak actually working on it. Wait, what they said that they just said in the interview that they spent a load of resources just making those instead of Pokemon games, though, didn't they?
And puzzle platformer Giga Wrecker. The Gear project is at its most active in the Gen 6 era, when those same devs could have been making Pokemon Z. Some of Game Freak's top talent worked on Gear Project games, like the directors of Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, and Ultra Sun and Moon. The teams who made
it's
Gear
not
games
accurate.
were small, but Z could have been made with a small team as well, and pretty quickly. Aurus, for example, was developed in just a year. In another Nintendo Dream we translated...
Yeah, but come on, guys. I mean, we already had Ruby and Sapphire. Like, we know what we're gonna do. The story's already written, guys. We don't have to worry about that.
Says Heart Gold and Soul Silver were made with just 12 developers, and Black 2 and White 2 had a similarly small team. Pokemon games grew their staff by 50% when they switched from 2D to 3D, so back of the napkin math, Z could have gotten made by 20 devs, 30 on the high end. Game Freak staff of
30 developers on one of the biggest franchises in the world? Man, I don't know. That doesn't seem like much, but at the same time, and you can do a lot with 30 people, right? I countered VGC with it asking for the original Japanese transcript because I think it's his priority, not Game Freak's priority. So you think it was the interviewee's priority and not the company's priority? I guess some things could get lost in translation like that because language is hard.
Said in quite a few interviews that they're kind of tired of just making Pokemon year after year.
Yeah, no wonder.
Frankly, we can't blame them. They needed to recharge their batteries, learn...
I really wonder what would happen if Game Freak was like, I don't fucking want to do this anymore. I don't want to do it. Pokemon Company, just give it to someone else, dude. Just give it to someone else. Have them make the games. I don't want to do it anymore. If they had like a little temper tantrum and they're like, I don't want to do it. And the Pokemon Company was like, oh, fuck, we've got to find a developer now. What are we going to do? They just find a new developer to make the mainline games. I wonder how things would change. I wonder how things would be different.
Some new skills and work on something different for a change. Regrettably, their hopes of producing something more exciting than Pokemon didn't pan out. Gear Project games got decent reviews, but hardly anyone bought them. Talking to Famitsu, Masuda said, only 1 out of 50 Pokemon fans have played them. I've tried to tell our fans please try this one out, but the message didn't sink in.
Oh no, this is like this is like when you upload one thing on YouTube. I know I'm using the YouTube analogy a lot, but it's because I'm a YouTuber, so that's what makes sense to me. But it's like it's like streaming something. And that's not your usual stream game. And you're like, come on, guys, I worked hard on this stream, or I worked hard on this video. Come on, check it out. It's really good. I promise you it's really good. And people are just like, I don't really want to watch that, though. You know, I just don't really care about that all that much. So I'm just not going to do that. It happens. It's exactly what happens. It happens in video games. It happens in entertainment. Just because someone likes you for one thing doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be interested in everything that you do.
By all appearances, when Game Freak was making X and Y, they figured Z'd come next, but when the time came, they were too thin and stretched with the Gear project. To be fair to Game Freak though, prioritizing failed games over Pokemon probably wasn't the only reason we never got Z. There's likely some off-the-record factors we couldn't dig up, like personal interests or office politics. Unfortunately, they don't seem interested in...
I have heard at Game Freak, generally employee happiness is quite high. That they're like, oh yeah, they take us seriously, you know, we can do what we want, we're not like overworked or anything like that, which, that's good.
Sharing that story with the public. You might be wondering how much of Z actually got made. Well, based on our findings, it doesn't appear Z was ever in active development. We got help from data miners to look through Gen 7's
yeah, they
source
forgot.
code, but couldn't find evidence any code got copy-pasted from Z. Possibly some ideas got recycled, some Zygarde stuff, but not much actual work. Aside from sparse data and leftovers, and inferences based on series history and the XYZ anime, it's doubtful we'll ever know what Z might have become. Maybe Game Freak didn't know either. Probably over-optimistic wishful thinking on our part, but hopefully someday they'll figure it out. And
the funniest explanation is they totally forgot. They came into work one day and were like, okay, boys, girls, enemies, let's work on the newest Pokemon game. Guys, let's go. So what we're going to do, we're going to do, I don't know, it's like suns on moons, I guess. And then fast forward a year, they're like, oh, fuck. Oh, dude, we were supposed to make Z. Oh, no. No.
Making an episode in the eventual Gen 6 remakes. With Generations 5 and 6 out of the way, now let's move on to Gen 7. The same day Sun and Moon launched in 2016, Eurogamer reported that an enhanced version of Sun and Moon codenamed Pokemon Stars was coming to Switch the following year.
Oh my god, I remember Pokemon Stars. Oh, dude, this was a big part of the whole Pokemon YouTube scene back in the day. I remember. Marty says Pokemon Stars was never real. Oh, really? If Pokemon Stars was never real, then explain this. Explain this freaking game right here. Hold on, where is it? Where is it? Where is it? Yeah, there you go. Explain Splatoonion. All of this perfect video game that is complete, like ultra popular. Explain that. Explain this guy. Look at this Eevee. Yeah, that was the ROM hack Pokemon Star that just had a ton of goofy shit just in it. Like a version of Lily that had extendo arms like Luffy.
The article's author, deputy editor Tom Phillips, claimed to have several sources for the story, and at least one was saying,
oh my god, he looks like an older version of Frank. Asteroid Videos, doesn't he?
Appreciate it. This might be a mistake.
Dude, he looks like Frank.
Right.
That's the same guy. That's the same guy.
DLC's gonna
That's
go.
the same
I don't know
fucking
the ins and
guy.
outs. I'm going in completely blind.
That's straight up the same guy.
Switch Edition would add new Pokemon. Fans were excited to hear Alola was coming to an HD console, which presumably meant we'd get to explore Alola in a higher resolution than the 3DS's meager 240p. Some fans even canceled their plans to buy Sun and Moon to wait for Stars instead. Hype continued to build over the next few months, especially when the Pokemon Company announced a new campaign called Look Upon the Stars, which saw the release of an entire line of Stars-themed merch.
Why is there a random Machoke just holding a Seviper? What is he going to do with the Seviper? Is he going to throw it? What is that Machoke planning to do holding a massive snake like that? I'm so confused.
Series director Junichi Masuda made a tweet starting with the words Pokemon Stars that some fans saw as a teaser for things to come. Anticipation peaked in mid-2017 when Amazon UK started selling pre-orders for Pokemon Stars. It appeared to be just a placeholder, as there was no box art and the release date was January 2030. But that didn't stop Stars from climbing the
and the pre-order price was 70 quid? What a ripoff!
Sales charts and reaching number 87 on Amazon's video game bestsellers list. Official confirmation seemingly arrived when Ultra Sun and Moon were announced, and the Pokemon Company's website said they were coming to Switch at a later date. They
There's a constellation called the Serpent Bearer. Oh, okay, that's really cool.
quickly deleted the Switch reference and put out a statement saying it was a clerical error, but some fans believe the slip-up was Stars getting revealed earlier than intended. Ultra Sun and Moon were, after all, very similar to how Eurogamer described Pokemon Stars, an expansion of Sun and Moon with some new Pokemon added, launching holiday 2017.
Man, this
Main
cutscene was
difference
great.
that there were 2 games instead of 1, and of course the platform they launched on. So to some, a Switch release still seemed likely. One detail that went unreported all these years is that the Pokemon Company fired the team responsible for the website, saying Ultra Sun and Moon were coming to Switch. We couldn't 100% confirm it was because of that mistake,
fired
but
them?
they got replaced right after it happened. So it
Oh,
certainly
man.
appears that's why they were
Yeah, it
gotten
definitely
rid of.
was.
Another point of note, we talked earlier about how Sun and Moon's source code contained 2 then unreleased games codenamed Alola Reserve. Those eventually became the Ultra games, but they were reserved spots. It's possible Game Freak only would have filled one of those reservations and left the other unused. On the other hand, if Pokemon Stars actually did exist, it's possible it was a code name for 2 Switch games.
Oh, their contract was 5 years and it ended in the summer. Okay, so they didn't get fired for saying it was on Switch. I was gonna say, that'd be a very much an overreaction. Like, I am an overreactor. I'm a YouTuber and a reaction YouTuber. So I overreact all the time. But I don't think that a firing is the correct response. That makes more sense that their contract just ended.
Not necessarily just one. Regardless, eventually it became clear Stars was never coming. 1 year after his original 2016 article, Eurogamer's Tom Phillips returned with a post-mortem titled, "So what happened with Pokemon Stars?" The internet had been ripping him a new one all year, so understandably he felt he owed an explanation. Long story short.
Man, being a journalist has got to be really hard. You have to put in all this research, you have to put in all this time and effort. Like, if I'm a YouTuber, I can just say whatever. And people don't consider YouTubers to be like a good source of information for some reason. So I could say something wrong and it's like, fine. Someone will just post in the comment, "You're wrong about this," and like most people won't even see it. But if you're a journalist and you get something really big wrong, no one trusts you ever again. It's over. Your trust is completely broken. It's donezo.
Sure, he said his sources indicated that Stars' cancellation was primarily a casualty of Nintendo's business strategy. After the failure of the Wii U, Nintendo originally wanted to release their 3 biggest IP for Switch year 1: Zelda, Mario, and Pokemon. But plans changed after the Switch exploded in popularity. And the problem wasn't that Nintendo couldn't sell them, it was that they were selling out of them, and couldn't even make enough to keep up with demand. They didn't need to play their trump card anymore. In fact, it would have only made the Switch shortages worse. So instead, Ultra Sun and Moon and a few other big titles like Metroid Samus Returns were released throughout 2017 to keep the 3DS on life support, as a backup plan in case the Switch couldn't carry the company all on its own.
Dude, I mean, listen, if you are already selling out of your console and it is selling like hotcakes so fast that you can't even replace them in time, then I don't think you have to worry about it not being able to support the company. It's clearly doing very well.
Nintendo's official position at the time was that both consoles would exist side by side, and the Switch wasn't a replacement for 3DS. Eurogamer also said an HD 3DS port selling for $60 could have made the Switch look bad in its first year, which was another factor in Stars being canned. Understandably, some folks were pessimistic about Eurogamer's reporting, with some even accusing Eurogamer of making it all up for clicks. In the interest of presenting both sides, we should give some time to the rumor's most prominent critic, Cerebi webmaster Joe Merrick.
Hold on, he's fucking here. He's fucking here in the chat. He said, "Well, what a load of bollocks." It's Cerebi, man!
He publicly accused Eurogamer of spreading BS and fake rumors, and argued with Tom Phillips in his article's comment section.
Oh my god, Joe! In the comment section of the article? It's funny.
Now, with almost 5 years as hindsight, we talked to Joe and asked what he makes of the rumor. He told us he thought Sun and Moon might have been ported to Switch purely for the sake of testing, and was never meant to become an actual product for sale. Maybe someone at Nintendo saw it running on Switch in HD, got the wrong idea, and leaked it to Eurogamer. Or maybe, Joe says, Tom's source just made it all up. When we talked to Tom, he emphatically denied both possibilities, saying Eurogamer doesn't run stories based on a single source, and the typical requirement is 3 sources at minimum. He wouldn't reveal who his sources were, of course, but he did say they were in professional positions where mistaking a test port for a real game was next to impossible. To be fair to Tom, we should point out that he's got a pretty good track record. He was the first to report on the Switch's design and internal hardware specs, almost 3 months before they were officially revealed by Nintendo. He was also...
Yeah, it could have been that the 3 sources that he talked to had all heard this thing from the same person. They could have all got their information from the same person. And if he was talking to them separately, it could be that some wires got crossed and they all thought that they were genuinely giving good information, and they'd all heard that information from the first source that had gotten it wrong. That's possible.
So the first to report on the Super NES Classic, Diablo 3 on Switch, and quite a few other games long before they were officially announced. Not everything he's written about made their way onto store shelves, like an English localization of Mother 3, but suffice it to say there's a lot of clout chasers in the gaming industry with fake insider information. But Tom isn't one of them. He told us he stands by his post-mortem article, and for the record, reiterated that the Pokemon Company did originally plan to release the Stars project on Switch in holiday 2017. In an attempt to corroborate Tom's reporting, we reached out to about 50 devs who worked on Gen 7, but they all turned...
50 devs? That's insane. That is next level. They did 10 and they were like, let's do 10 more. They did 10 more and they were like, Let's try 10 more. Let's try 10 more again. Okay, so let's try 10 more again. And they really tried. That's kind of crazy.
Down or didn't bother responding. Pokemon keeps their people on pretty tight lockdown, unfortunately.
Yeah, it makes sense that they wouldn't respond. You say something wrong, you slip up, you're done so. The Nintendo ninjas, they're coming at your neck.
There sure was a lot of smoke, but we can't say conclusively if there was ever fire. Whether or not Pokemon stars ever existed remains a mystery even to this day.
Isn't that like all of them?
For this last game, we just want to say right off the bat, it's been designated lost media for years, but we restored it. And as of today, it's been added to the Internet Archive. It ain't lost media anymore, and you can play it right now if you like. We'll talk about that more in a minute, but first, let's look at the game itself.
It looks exactly like the anime.
2000 Adventure was an officially licensed game that ended up being better than Nintendo expected it to be when they signed the contract.
Really? I mean, listen, looking at it, I'm not trying to say anything, but initially it doesn't.
By then, a million people had already played it.
It's not that special.
The history on this one is pretty unique. The second Pokemon movie, called Pokemon the Movie 2000, was distributed in America by Warner Brothers. Along with the movie, Nintendo fully licensed and gave permission for Warner Brothers to create promotional materials to sell more tickets. Nintendo were probably expecting posters.
2000? Yeah, I know, but I'm saying like in 2000 you can make games that look fun to play, and this game that was a web browser game kind of going around and just like seeing sprites, 2D sprites of Pokemon doesn't seem that like fun.
Art, trailers, and maybe cheap web games like Pikachu-themed tic-tac-toe, but they weren't expecting Warner Brothers to spend millions producing a 3D Pokemon game. But that's exactly what Warner Brothers did.
They spent millions on this?
A studio called Cyberworld, who previously made virtual shopping malls, a Harry Potter game, and various other three-dimensional experiences. Think of them like Doom. 3D spaces populated with 2D sprites, but running in an internet browser. Pretty impressive back in the 90s. Warner Brothers wanted to use this cutting-edge technology to promote the new Pokemon movie. We talked to Eddie Ruminski, one of Cyberworld's developers.
We launched it and we had about 1 million downloads in the span of a month.
This actually came out?
Our most popular game to date.
That's crazy.
And that's when Nintendo freaked. And
why?
They immediately hit us with a cease and desist.
Oh, they weren't allowed?
Thought Warner Brothers breached the contract. They exceeded the contract's allowable scope, basically.
By making a web game? Okay, to be fair, games are Nintendo's big thing. I could understand if they had someone else make a game with their IP. You know how good they are with their IP. You know how under lock and key the Nintendo is with their IPs. They don't want anyone touching it. They don't want anyone tickling the chins. They don't want anyone looking at it.
Nintendo.
So I'm not surprised they freaked out in 2000.
That promotion to include something that was legitimately a video game.
Just say that you can't play it. Just make it on Rails instead.
Back then,
1 million downloads is a lot.
Pokemon games that existed were Pokemon Snap and Pokemon Stadium. So Nintendo thought fans would see this first-person adventure and think it was a new direction the series was headed in. They considered it a threat.
It's fair enough.
Concerned it would cause brand confusion. Eddie was sort of a junior programmer at the time, but he was the only guy at Cyberworld familiar with Pokemon. The company got a pre-release of Pokemon the Movie 2000, sat Eddie in front of it, and asked, how the hell do we turn this into a video game? After they bounced some ideas back and forth with Warner Brothers, here's what they came up with. What you're watching now is one of our playthroughs.
Okay, I'm gonna make a guess. So you have to go to these different areas and you have to catch Pokemon that will enable you to catch better Pokemon, and then eventually your task is to catch the 3 legendary birds, and after you catch the 3 legendary birds, you get Lugia.
Of Pokemon 2000 Adventure. The music you're hearing is the game's soundtrack. The game begins with Professor Oak telling you there's a disturbance in the Force, and you...
Ash, there's a disturbance, Ash. You must go to Dagobah, Ash. You must go to Dagobah and you have to find Yoda. He will teach you how to use Pokeballs, Ash. Please, you have to go. You must defeat the evil Lord Lugia and destroy his empire, Ash. You have to do it.
You've got to investigate. Then you pick one of 3 Pokemon teams and a difficulty: beginner, intermediate, or advanced. Now your adventure begins, exploring 3 islands in any order you want. Your path forward is sometimes blocked by environmental obstacles that require Pokemon's special abilities to get past, like these volcanic lava plumes, for example. On our playthrough, we used Poliwhirl's water gun to extinguish the flames. Then he got experience points and evolved into Poliwrath. Eventually,
wow, that must have been a tough fire. How much experience did they get for killing a fire?
Moltres. It asked us a trivia question about Lavender Town, and after we got it right, Moltres gave us a red ancient sphere. Then, on the next island, we used Lapras to freeze a lake and walk across it, melted an ice barrier with Vulpix, and answered Articuno's trivia question to get another sphere. On the final island, we cleared out some electric barriers and evolved a couple more Pokemon, and got the final sphere from...
I can't believe you could walk up to a Zapdos and it would say, all right, yo, welcome. So, yo, how many TMs are there, brother? Do you know how many TMs there are? Oh, you do? Here, take a sphere.
Zapdos. Then Professor Oak thanked us for saving the world and awarded us a certificate for beating the game. You can also get a final score and gold, silver, or bronze ranking, depending on how well you did. The game's
Gold,
only
silver, or bronze? Is that a secret? Is that a hint towards the next game? Oh, it wasn't even made by Nintendo, never mind.
about 10 minutes, but there's some replayability thanks to having 3 Pokemon teams and 3 difficulty settings to choose from. By the time Nintendo struck down the game, the devs had already got paid, they got to see the movie before it hit theaters, and they got to say they'd worked on a massively successful Pokemon game.
Yeah, that's pretty good for the resume.
Compliment via cease and desist, saying, sorry, what you made was too much like a good video game. At the end of the day, when it was pulled, it was more like, we've already been paid.
1 million people have already played it. Listen, if I get paid to make a video and 1 million people have watched it and then the video goes down, I'm like, oh, well, you know, it was a good video. 1 million people saw it.
Like,
That's
was
great.
a $2 million deal for that to make that game. Once it was
$2
pulled, it was
million
like, we did the work,
deal.
It was great. It was really popular. We hit the 1 million downloads that we didn't even dream of to begin with. So when it was pulled, we were all happy.
Warner Brothers was happy too. With 1 million downloads, they got more promotion than they were expecting, and Pokemon 2000 went on to become the second highest grossing Japanese movie to ever hit American theaters. So
Meanwhile, over in Japan, Nintendo's just like punching the air like, damn it, you made a freaking good game. It's gonna be brand confusion. People are gonna think we're making a 3D game, and we're not gonna do that for another 20 years. God damn.
really, everyone was happy except Nintendo. And if you want to play the game yourself, you'll be happy too.
Whoa!
Because here's directions on how you can play it right now.
It's probably
Eddie's
like a
been holding on to
20-minute
the
game.
raw files for the past 23 years. Then
That's
after
insane.
He saw our video about restoring Pokemon Garden, he reached out and sent us all the files. One of the
That's sick.
Pokemon Garden archivists, Rufus 10, and his friend Doomtay did some computer magic to get it working on the modern internet, which was a lot harder than it sounds. All credit goes to those guys. We were just sort of middlemen in the back and forth. We won't bore you with the technical restoration details, but like we said, it ain't lost media anymore. Go play it if you want. Might want to be quick about it though, just in case Nintendo strikes it down again. For preservation's
They're like, we don't want it to cause any brand confusion. People might think we're gonna make a 3D game.
We also archived the game's concept art, storyboards, soundtrack,
Oh, that's so
and
cool.
all the raw files. So even if it does get struck down, it'll always survive somewhere on the internet.
It is so sick that the developer had kept all of those files for so many years after it got cease and desisted. That's like 23 years of just holding on to files. I haven't held on to anything for 23 years. I barely held on to my sanity for 23 years. The fact that he did that, just in the back one day, maybe we'll have something we can do with it, is absolutely fantastic. I think that's great. I think this entire video, very cool. You should subscribe to Did You Know Gaming, though I have told you like 17 times to do it. So if you haven't done it, I'm very disappointed in you by now, but you still have a chance to rectify that. You can also subscribe to more Patterrz if you want to see me mold at more things and do reacts.